Welcome to this event arranged by Historians Without Borders. On behalf of our organization, I wish you all very welcome to this event and discussion on the politics of history in Russia, controlled and contested memories. I would like to tell you a bit more about our History in Exile project, this is the first public event of that project, and it will continue until spring, after which we have had similar events both in Stockholm and Tallinn, and we'll present a report of our discussions and the results of our deliberations. The aim is to bring together historians from Russia who are unable to continue their work in Russia today and are living in the Nordic and Baltic countries. But although we are concentrating on the politics of history in Russia, and today's themes are very much central to that, I would also remind you that as Historians Without Borders, we want to engage also historians from Russia's neighboring countries and other countries, because historians will always benefit from listening to the narratives of each other to increase understanding. But primarily, I would say the long-term goal of this project is to enhance the possibilities and lay the groundwork for a future Vergangenheitsbewältigung process in Russia, making it possible to openly and honestly address Russia's history together with historians and from other countries as well. And we want to encourage historians in all countries to be party to this effort. I also want to extend our thanks to the Nordic Council of Ministers, whose grant has enabled us to arrange this event and this project, and also to our partners in the Nordic, Baltic countries and Finland. And in Finland, our main partner is Aleksanteri Institute. And the next speaker will be the director of the Aleksanteri Institute. But once again, on behalf of Historians Without Borders, welcome. And you are all, of course, if you are interested in our work, welcome to join our organization and sign our declaration. And more on our activities can be found on our website, historianswithoutborders.fi. So once again, welcome to this event. Markku, please.
So, dear colleagues and dear Erkki, it's our pleasure to be a partner of Historians Without Borders and co-organize this event and to be part of the whole project. History has been, is, and will be really important part of the discussion and identity construction of the nations and different groups. And for that reason, I think that we are living more than topical and stormy period of time after Russia's attack on Ukraine. I think that historians are needed and to reconciliation of the nations and situation between nations and societies. They need the balanced approach of historians. I want, on behalf of the Aleksanteri Institute, welcome all of you, and I'm sure that we will have good discussions and presentations. So, welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is René Nyberg. I'm supposed to moderate the discussions following these opening remarks. And we'll start with Alexandra Polivanova. Пожалуйста. Так, я предлагаю, что вам более удобно здесь, да? Да. Хорошо.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear organizers, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for coming. And it's a big honor for me to be here. Yes, I would like to start with to say that on February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and you probably can put the first slide. Thank you. And this crime sparked protest reactions in many Russian cities, and certainly this protest was disproportionate to the crimes committed, but much to the consternation of the Russian authorities, who saw the public protest as a threat to the war plan. And that's why a week after the full-scale invasion began, on March 4, so next week, the Russian authorities introduced wartime laws in Russia, fakes about the Russian army, discrediting the Russian army, fakes about Russian authorities, etc. And many laws prohibit telling truth about the war. It's prohibited calling war the war as a war. Instead, you should say special military operation. You cannot say that Russian army is killing civilians, destroying homes, maternity houses, theaters, and so on. So since then, any kind of protest against the war in Russia became criminalized, and which has certainly sharply reduced the protest against the war and contributed to a very large wave of emigration of the active part of society from Russia to other countries. However, it cannot be said that people have completely abandoned attempts to protest against the aggressive Russian war, and as well as against the internal repressions of the regime in Russia, which resulted in the war, or which made the war possible. Of course, courage people still protested and still continue the protest in various ways, openly, and showing the lack of fear of being arrested. You have heard these names, some of them even luckily was released last summer as Oleg Orlov and Ilya Yashin, but still a lot of prisoners like Alexei Gorinov, who is in court right now. So, however, not everyone can afford it, and not everyone has the courage to protest openly up to arrest. And I will try to show how, on the one hand, Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine seems to be connected to the poor critical reflection on the memory of the Soviet terror, and on the other hand, how protest against the war turned out to be connected to the memory of the Soviet terror, and about the new role of the sites of memory in public space, sites of memory about the Soviet terror, and what which new processes the war probably provoked in Russian society. And my attention is very attracted by the fact that, so due to, given my optics, because I'm working at Memorial, so I have been working with issues of memory and historical memory, history and memory, and that's why my attention is very attracted by the fact that one of the important weapons of Putin's regime has become the weaponization, manipulation of history and memory, and perhaps this manipulations became possible because Russian society, from which I cannot exclude myself, failed to appropriate the history and memory, failed to keep it away from the state and state manipulations, and how the state managed with this. So now a short retrospective. How developed the memory of the Soviet terror. So everyone knows that in 1943 Stalin died, and almost immediately changes in the Soviet Union began, and 1956 the 20th Congress of the Communist Party took place, and Nikita Khrushchev made a report on Stalin's cult of personality and its consequences, followed by the mass release of prisoners in gulags who survived, of those who survived Gulag, and also the mass posthumous rehabilitation of those who were killed. However, also much was accomplished during so-called otsipel. It was impossible to speak publicly in full about the system of the Soviet terror, and some Soviet and Bolsheviks party, I don't know, top managers who had been killed were given memorial plaques on the early 60s. This is Moscow, and this is Mikhail Tukhachevsky and Mikhail Koltsov, who both, so one of them was like top manager in the Soviet army, and the second one was one of the main journalists and propagandists, Mikhail, and poet as well, Mikhail Koltsov. So you see that, I don't know if you see, but you can just see the, it looks like all general memorial plaques in Moscow or in Russia or in Soviet Union. So you cannot see on these plaques that these two guys, that they were somehow killed. So you can think that they just stayed there, and then they continue, they work in another building or something like that. And starting 80s, public conversation about Stalin's terror was not possible at all. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn was persecuted, and terror to a much lower level than under Stalin continued. But everything changed in the late 80s. Please. And then there was a real glasnost, real freedom of speech, late Soviet freedom of speech. So let's say, and huge flows of information, memoirs, artistic testimonies, and documents about Stalin's terror in the USSR came up. All newspapers and magazines published information about the state terror in 2050s. TV programs and movies about Soviet crimes were shown, poems and prose were published, and the names of the artists and writers who were persecuted by the Soviet regime were returned. And the time between 1989 and 2005 was 15 years of the freest memory about the Soviet terror ever. So it was the era of the memory without manipulation. All possible grassroots initiatives were more or less welcome in more or less all regions of huge country in borders of Russian Federation. However, it seems unfortunately all the information about the terror was like dumped on society's information field, but it was not analyzed. It was not so it did not trigger processes of critical reflection and did not become the basis for the search for causes, connections, consequences, new identities, new values that could form the basis of social construction of the future Russian. And it was as if people had read information in the newspapers, watched some reports on TV, and perhaps learned the truth about the destiny, about the fate, about their relatives, and they like said, wow, now I know what happened. And then they went out to survive and I don't know, earn money for living because the Soviet Union was collapsing and the structure of the whole life was collapsing and disintegrating, and it was necessary to try to put it back together to survive at least. And all the memory work instead of full-scale, large-scale work at all levels of society, to build, to connect the memory into the system of values of society was like delegated to more or less one public NGO non-government organization. And Memorial Society, which was found late 80s as a civil movement. It was a large civil movement with like 1 million members, and then was established as an organization, and then gradually like got some institutionalization and has become a sustainable network of organization throughout Russia and other countries, but also, Memorial's public influence gradually declined, but it never disappeared. And some important things Memorial managed to do, at least. And I would like to point out one thing which Memorial has succeeded in doing then. One of the succeed was that in various cities, usually with the support of regional authorities, they succeed to build, to erect a small or large or a small monument to the victims of the political terror in the USSR. And these were monuments to the victims. These monuments for mourning. So many of these monuments was not much words on it, not much information about it. So it wasn't. They didn't provide any information about the systems, the structure of the terror, of the violence, but it was like a symbolic place in every city. And Yes, and why I'm showing it because they were not so significant, and sometimes they are not in the center of the city, of the cities. But later on, they will play an important role. And in the 90s, many people. And the memorial, among others, supported the idea that so far it was the state who committed the crimes of the Soviet Union. It was the Soviet state, which was like totalitarian state. And as a consequence, so it's the state who has the responsibility now for it. So it was from the state that Memorial wanted to get a state monument, a big state monument or memorial to the victims of the political terror. It was from the state that Memorial tried to get museum of Gulag and terror. It was from yes, and the Memorial also somehow accepted the idea that the state archives remained in states or even in special services. And the Memorial and I don't know, civil society around or communities around Memorial, they supported the law on rehabilitation for the victims, but they did not support the idea of laws of lustrations and other transitional justice laws. So only this rehabilitation law. And Memorial late 2010, 2011, 12, Memorial was commissioned by the state to write a draft of the concept of the of state policy on commemorating the victims of political repressions. And Memorial wrote this concept and gave it to the state. So it was like a state task to do all this. It was severally cut and edited, but it was accepted by Putin and Medvedev. The memory of repressions became a state project in Russia. The memory work after the crimes of the communist regime, a regime that left nothing to the private and public sphere, that controlled all sphere of human life and society for 70 years, was delegated to a follower of. So the memory of these crimes was delegated to the follower of such a state. And the work of non-government public organizations as like Memorial turned out to be largely a work of influence on the authorities, but less as an influence and dialogue with broader groups in society. And what was left for Russian society then to do? So they just could get enough popcorn and watch the state to do the work and to watch Memorial to try pushing the authorities to do this memory work. But the society themselves, they had a lot of things to do with earning money, making culture, exhibitions, theater, film, whatever you want, but not to do this memory work. And this probably would be okay in a democratic state when the government somehow represents society. But when the government starts the war in Chechnya, invades Georgia, occupies Crimea, is arresting political prisoners, and with its other hand, this state opens the monuments and museum of victims of repression and Gulag and so on. So this has like the opposite effect, and the state readily like occupied the mandate placed in its hands. And this concept of the state policy on commemorating the victims, which was written by Memorial activists originally, so it's became like a tool for censorship. It became a tool for control the memory of terror and the Gulag. And since then, more or less, only state institutions are allowed to talk about state terror and international crimes in USSR. And sorry, I have to shorten myself. And it has led to the criminalization of independent initiatives of history practices. And of course, the society whose task was so not to work with these memory and values issues. So when the state started to work to manipulate with the memory and the history issues according to their paradigm, and that's why the society was unable to cancel, to stop the catastrophe or in any way, when on February 21st, Putin made 2022, Putin made one of his historical anti-Ukrainian speeches, and then when the Russian army began bombing Kyiv, probably because the society accepted this idea that it was the state who is responsible for the state crimes, because it was not the society, it was not this responsibility of citizens and of the society for the crimes committed by the state. And yes, that was the bad news. But I will somehow try to continue with something which sounds a bit more positive for me. So it's not completely good news, but there are some encouraging trends for me that somehow these processes which we didn't saw in the 90s and then later, somehow they started after February 24. And on February 24, 2022, people in Ukraine found themselves in a situation of physical humanitarian catastrophe, and Russian society found itself in a situation, I mean civil society, representatives of Russian civil society, found themselves in a situation of moral catastrophe. But I would say that this catastrophe seems to be contributing somehow somehow to provoke, I don't know, critical thinking about all these things which was not been done for the previous 25 years. And I see that Russian society, or civil activists at least, are becoming more agentic in matters of memory, and more regional memorial initiatives are becoming more visible now. And this for Civil Activist Association and the colonial activists from different regions of Russia have begun to engage in a dialogue about the Soviet experience with all circles of society within Russia. And it's important that all social, ethnic, regional, religious, confessional, etc. groups that have lived through different experiences of oppressions in the USSR and suffered from forced Russification, gender discrimination, homophobia, restriction of cultural rights in USSR and even in Russia before the revolution, they started to speak out and to be heard. And intersectional, like palimpsest of identities and oppression is more visible. And a lot of decolonial activists inside Russia, Buryatia, Kalmykia, Republic of Sakha, Bashkortostan, and in exile, activists from these regions of Russia in exile of Russian Federation. And the idea of the activism right now and the attitudes towards the Soviet Union is that all residents of the USSR and even other countries could have been arrested and if not killed and ended up in the Gulag. But the language of Gulag was Russian, and if a person who did not speak Russian ended up in Gulag, he was a victim of double discrimination because he was unable to build connections with other prisoners, for example. And if a woman found herself in the Gulag along with the unfreedom in the Gulag system itself, she faced the patriarchal structure of society among the prisoners too. It's already triple oppression, and this is the the optics of decolonial activists. And yeah, for example, in 2024, we did a small survey of young people in Chechnya and from Chechnya in exile, in immigration, how young Chechens think about deportation of 1943-56. And unlike the same interviews my colleagues did 20 years ago, young people talk about the stigma they still face today, which was not relevant 20 years ago in such interviews. And yes, I will miss it. And the interest and questioning about the anti-Soviet resistance is also increasing before our eyes from anti-war activists and from political activists, I don't know, from, I don't know, Alexei Navalny, media, and so on. And apparently many activists expand the concept of dissidents from the paradigm of human rights defenders in Moscow and Leningrad to the ability to see dissidents in the fighters for the preservation of national languages, national religions, and so on within the Republic of USSR and Russian Federation. And also growth of archival requests. Our colleagues from Memorial Archives and colleagues from in Lithuanian archives and in Poland have recorded at 3 times increased requests for archival information on repressed relatives and genealogical research. And these requests often come from younger generation. It is often related to pragmatic interest because people would like to obtain documents for immigration to Poland, to Lithuania, Israel, maybe Finland. But at the same time, it's much more than this. They would like to exclude themselves from these Russian aggressors who are bombing Ukraine, and they would like to feel themselves, to associate themselves more as victims of the Russian oppressors. And everyone, I guess everyone saw the... And next one also. Yes, next. Yes, everyone. You probably have seen flowers to Ukraine at monuments to victims of the state terror, Soviet state terror, like Ukraine Forgive Us, and these different. So these. These monuments in the cities which I showed you from 90s, these became the points for partly underground, partly public anti-war resistance in the cities of Russia, where the very monuments attracted activists as a point, as a site of protests. And it was not like an invitation from Memorial, for example, to come to this place. So people, young activists from different cities, they came themselves, they choose exactly these monuments and not other monuments to show not the monuments of the war, for example. Sometimes they used also the war monuments, the Second World War, but mostly monuments to the victims of political terror. And next, please. Yes, next. Yes, and this you can see, for example, Vyshyvanka Day. It's traditional Ukrainian embroidery, and it's placed now on Ukrainian cross monument in Sandarmoh, Karelia, site of mass graves. And it was Vyshyvanka Day when Ukraine celebrates, so it's day. And the second, yeah, and probably next slide. And yes, this is a memory day of remembrance of the victims of deportation from the Baltic states. And you can see, and activists joined the commemorative events, the Kommunarka mass grave sites near Moscow and as well in Yekaterinburg and other cities. And they read the names of those deported from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Ukraine in 40s, but you can see that they have yellow and blue flowers. So it was important for them to show solidarity to Ukraine today. Yes, and this is October 29, and every year in Russia it's a name of the day of remembrance for victims of Soviet terror and political prisoners. And people usually come to big memorials with flowers and reading the names. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, but you can see the protest against the war placed on this place. And next. Yes, yes, and this is when Alexei Navalny was killed, but we can miss it. And yes, it is the same. Next. Yes, and this is also Sandarmoh. This is August 2022 or 23. I don't remember now. Sorry. It shows that site of memory becomes a site of resistance, because people show not only yellow and blue flowers, but even yellow-blue flags, and some of them were shortly arrested after that. And next, please. And yeah, next, please. I have no time for it. During last 3 years, Russia has experienced unprecedented vandalism of monument to victims of repression. We have already recorded more than 30 demolished monuments to the victims of national groups, Poles, Lithuanian, and also people from Finland, and several hundred demolished plaques the last address, which is an analog of German project Stolpersteine, when plaques with people names are installed at the places of the arrest in 30s. And these plaques are vandalized, and they are shut down by pro-Kremlin pogroms, I don't know, activists pro-Kremlin. But the very same day as it happens, unknown activists come to these cities in Petersburg, in Moscow, and they organize the self-made monuments and self-made plaques and flowers and so on. Next. Okay. Yes, and short summary is that it's an obvious fact that the Russian state is committing horrible international crimes against humanity and attempted genocide of Ukraine. And yes, most of the people of Russia accept if not support this war. However, there are civil activists in different fields. Not only memory activists, they are also ecological activists, LGBT activists, however, anti-war activists, and a lot of activists, often anonymous, who today in Russia see the connection and the consequences of the past crimes and present crimes, who feel not only the responsibility of the state, but also the responsibility of Russian citizens, and who are doing something about it. There is no need to exaggerate the significance, so it's not so optimistic. But if you want to see and support like sources of attempts of responsibility in Russia, I think they are there, and it's just a question of the visibility of your vision. So how you use your optics, and yes, probably it was that.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you very much. I have one question. I've been several times to the offices, the premises of Memorial in Moscow, which have been now vandalized and all of that. We had the Moscow School of Political Science, now called Civic School of Education. Lena Nemirovskaya organized several events there, and I saw the archives. What happened to the archives of Memorial? Because they were very, very valuable. They are very valuable.
Yes, they are, and they are safe, and they are even open for users in a digital way. So you can use them, and you can use these archives. They are digitalized, and they are safe.
Well, that's good news. Thank you very much. Well, the next, we'll now continue with the panel, and I'll invite Mikhail Nakonechnyi and Jukka Korpela to join me. And maybe I'll say a word. Why don't the two of you sit? Jukka, are you comfortable?
Yes.
I don't think I have much of a role as a moderator, which we'll see how this goes. I think one of the things Alexandra mentioned was, of course, criminalization of history studies, or criminalization of kind of talking history and working with history. Isn't this what this panel is supposed to talk about when we talk about politics of history in Russia? Jukka.
Well, actually, the key question by my mind is, what is the meaning of history?
Getting philosophic?
No, but if we speak about history or think that there is some kind of weaponization of history or criminalization of different interpretations, or a control or of memory. Do we think that there is some kind of right history, objective history in the world? I think that history is a story. It's always subjective. And thus, well, this means that, of course, Russia is using history or misusing it and having it as a legitimization of the political and military actions. But does every other nation do the same? I think that the role of the history in the history has been the legitimization of power. This one side of the history, so that it's impossible to write objective, right history.
Well, we talk about Russia now. We're not talking about all the others.
Yeah, but I mean, we should perhaps take a perspective so that this Russian interpretation, it is of course Russian interpretation, but the Finnish interpretation is a Finnish interpretation. And then if we think that we misuse history for supporting our political deeds or to interpretation of memory, this is always a political action. It has been and it will be. So that there is a perspective also to these Russian actions.
This is a good start. I'm a keen student of history. I'm not a professional historian. But one thing which I think is important to remember is that, of course, state leaders make history, but they don't write it. Writing history is your job.
No, they write. Mr. Putin has done this very much like his predecessors. So he is not a unique person in Russia, neither in Russia nor in the other part of the world. And he has used history for the legitimization. But why I say this, that the history is subjective. History should not be taken too seriously. I mean, it does not legitimize any war actions or killing people. It's just a story.
I always take history very seriously. That's because I'm a student of history. Ilya.
First of all, it's a
I'm
great...
sorry, Mikhail, I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm
no
sorry.
problem at all. First of all, it's a great honor to share this panel with the representative of Memorial, whom I consider like real heroes now in contemporary Russia, facing enormous political pressure and real danger to their health and safety. So, and I consider myself to be inspired by their example decades ago, actually, when I just started as a historian. But speaking about what the colleague said about the lack of objectivity in historical writing, I actually want to make this point. I think it's very important to understand that Russia is quite different in one very important regard in writing narratives about history. And at the moment, millions upon millions of Russians has been systematically exposed to a conspiratorial framework of thinking about the darkest pages of Russian and Soviet history. And on the one hand, historical conspiratorial negationism is, as I agree, is certainly not unique to Russia. All countries have skeletons in the closet, and the past is intensely politicized pretty much everywhere. In Japan, you can find pseudo-scholars denying the rape of Nanking. In Turkey, there is a denial of Armenian genocide. There is a streak of denialism concerning colonial atrocities of Western empires in the 19th century, American atrocities in the Philippines, Vietnam, Iraq, Rwanda genocide, former Yugoslavia, and of course, not to mention the most notorious case of Holocaust denial all over the world. But as a rule, this kind of pseudo-scholarship is marginalized and ostracized both by institutions and society. Russia, meanwhile, at the moment, represents a quite unique case because these conspiratorial types are totally normalized and accepted by mainstream media and educational institutions where they occupied a significant portion of public discourse. By the early 2000s, neo-Stalinists and other, I would say, imperial revisionism in many forms dominated internet spaces dedicated to history, and even some universities and research institutions. Its proponents received millions of rubles in government funding, which precipitated a massive upsurge of publication of pseudo-historical literature and created online media problems with audiences that reached millions. This has very detrimental consequences for the critical thinking of the average viewer. As a result, a significant portion of the non-specialist population became inculcated with a conspiratorial approach in the interpreting reality. And this process, I think, actually has been instrumental in the widespread denial of atrocities in Ukraine, because to a large extent, much of the denialism of the public sphere is spouted by these people, this Z network connected, and I can name them. So this conspiratorial mindset facilitates the transition from the past to the present almost effortlessly. So to quote Peter Pomerantsev, the purpose of the Russian propaganda is both to spread falsehoods and to sow a pervasive postmodern doubt as the very possibility of truth and objectivity. This pseudo-critical approach is epitomized by a quote from Vladimir Medinsky, an architect of the Russian historical revisionism and the former Minister of Culture, who was a participant in talks with Ukraine. Medinsky infamously claimed in defense of his plagiarized thesis from critics, "You just have to admit it, a reliable, verifiable past simply does not exist." In essence, according to this postmodern take, there are no undeniable facts, only politicized interpretations and competing narratives. This is why claims by Sergei Lavrov, who said just days after the invasion of that Russia did not invade, were not even criticized by anyone, because in this framework, facts do not exist. There are only competing narratives, and the goal of the Russian state is to foster such a conceptualization of the past and contemporary reality that is glorious, triumphant, and contains nothing to be ashamed of. Hence, all dark pages like invasions, repressions, and forced labor are downplayed, trivialized, debrutalized, with specious whataboutisms or outright denied. So the amount of weird conspiratorial theories that are circulating in the media, for example, that US has its own Holodomor concealed in the 1920s and early 30s under Roosevelt, that, for example, the Gulag camps were holiday resorts and the Western prisons at the time were much worse, for example, or that 1937 did not even exist, actually were being spouted by people with university and academic degrees. And I think that if anything like that would happen in the Western country, for all its flaws, and I agree that there are also problematic interpretations of the Western historical discourse, their career would be over. In Russia, you could do it without any accountability, and you have an audience of millions, and that is a very, very fundamental difference. So I think that we should be.
Thank you very much for your very, very detailed expose. The question now is that let's leave relativization aside. Let's leave what about this aside. And the question is, how deep will this pseudo-historical, totally politicized view of the past and the present affect the population and the academia? I mean, Russia is a country with professional historians. It's a country with a great tradition of historical studies, and I've met people, and I know that they are not easily fooled, and the archives are there. Рукописи не горят. We all have this. So my question is, and Jukka, you're the right person to answer. Do you think this will really change things? Because nothing is forever.
No, but I have to reply. The history is not guilty, or the character of the history is not guilty. The very reason is the different culture and different kind of, let's say, social system. In Western countries, pluralistic countries, you use history in another way, but it's, of course, if you have, well, Russia is not a legal state, it is not a pluralistic state, and therefore you can use history in public as it is used now, and it has been used in the very past. So Putin hasn't, well, actually written a new history. His history has been written already a long time ago. There is a huge difference between Russian professional historians in academic cycles and then this history image, what we read in public books. I've been very interested in this public image and both books from stories in railway station and others. But Russian colleagues had said that why you are reading that kind of nonsense? They do not read it. They are professional historians. They think like we. But this history image is not in the public. One colleague said when I thought that President Putin, he has said so. And he just commented that perhaps he was a very active pupil in the secondary school and read the books there. So, I mean, there is two histories and two perspectives to it. You said that there are professional histories. Indeed, there are professional high-level historians. But then this history image, which is used in politics, this is totally another thing. And what was a key point here was that this memory policy is monopolized by the state. It's state policy.
Yes,
and that's of course under the control.
There's no free academic exchange. Yeah. That's for evident. But these historians, which we know and respect, they can't take Medinsky serious.
No.
And he knows that because he's not a serious historian.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I call you Ilya. I don't know why. You're Mikhail, I'm sorry for
that.
No
problem at all. Misha is also okay. I completely agree. There are brilliant historians in Russia, and Memorial is actually has brilliant historians of the Soviet repression. But the key issue here is that the professional community who doesn't want to play according to the party line at the moment just simply can't convey the results to the audience. The audience is now, I would say, the general population learn history through YouTube, and YouTube is totally dominated by hacks. By pseudo historians, I would say it so. And if you compare, for example, the views of the absolutely brilliant Memorial lectures, you could see that they have 10,000 views. And I don't know, Goblin Puchkov, who is this neo-Stalinist viewer, they do have 5-10 million views.
Yeah.
And this is a catastrophe. So it's not the issue that there are no good historians in Russia. Of course there are. And you shouldn't generalize easily or undervalue their contribution. But there is no opportunity, as you correctly pointed out, there is no free academic exchange, and there is no way to convey their findings or their arguments to the broader society, because it's all being co-opted by the state. And of course, there is also a minority of historians who work for the state and who propagate the narratives that I've been speaking about, with degrees, with doctoral dissertations. So it's not like they are, that the historical profession in Russia is independent and against the state. No, unfortunately, it's more complex than that. There is a quite significant portion of people who absolutely consciously work for the state.
It's a dim view. It's a very dim view. Jukka,
yeah, but it's also what is important to see is a cultural load. That persons are not individuals. They skip easily that kind of responsibility about the opinions and interpretations for others and for the state. It's a state official interpretation about history, and that's that. I'm not very sure how seriously people take this interpretation. It's like in the Soviet time, okay, this is the learning, and that's that. And then we think on our own way, and therefore history can be used in a very cruel way in public and can be used politically, so as we just saw in this memory politics, it supports the agenda of the political actors. Of course, it's different. In pluralistic societies, we have also always opposition which criticize. But this is not part of the history. History can be used also by the opposition.
Alexandra, would you come? If you want to come in, please feel free to join us.
Yeah, I just, so according to my, own theory, so memory and historical memory is a field somewhere close to freedom of speeches and freedom of conscience, and we do need freedom of memories, freedom of memories, and in democratic societies, or I don't know, yeah, pluralistic societies. So we have several memories, several, I don't know, concepts of history, and then you cannot use history as a weapon, as a, I don't know, to misuse history somehow. But in a autocracy like Russia, official history is becoming a weapon against the society. But at the same time, for civil activists, it is becoming the tool for resistance and the way for resistance. So struggling for your memory is a struggle with the state.
But what I have learned from Russian society, that Russians, they like much more to belong to the group and be members of some bigger group and unanimously support the opinions than to criticize all the time and to be in an opposition. So in that kind of atmosphere, it's very much easier to share the official message than to say that, no, I do not agree, I'm totally on another opinion, which is a part of the Western cultural atmosphere more.
There's an European, more a Western aspect to politics of history in Russia, and that is that our view of Ukraine is based on the Russian view, or our basic view on Ukrainian history is based on the old imperial, Stalinist, Putinist, whatever you call it. And the fact that we have only now come to the conclusion that there is a Ukrainian history, which is not the history which the Stalinist version, the imperial version, or the Putin version was, and this is where we come to this is something which is very important as seen from Germany, because Germany and Russia, Berlin and St. Petersburg, Berlin and Moscow were the ones who actually considered Poland to be there was the child of Versailles. It disturbed them because they lost their common border, and Ukraine was always, from Moscow's point of view, Ukraine was always a Polish problem. All of this has now been we've been forced to rethink history of Ukraine and history of Russia. And this is something which I don't know if you see that in the history debate, if you can talk about history debate in Russia.
Well, you give a hint for a book, what's the Wessel-Schmidt, or to rethink the history, the imperiums, and how the Germans have done this history memory policy. And in the very end of the book, he writes that the Russians should do the same. And I'm actually very skeptic. There are Russian historians who rethink the role of Ukraine, for example. Andrei Dvernichenko, St. Petersburg historian, wrote an amazing article published in Russian History Histoire Russe a couple of years ago concerning the Ukrainian history, where he told that actually it is not so clear as it said in Russian history book, but it's clearly a question between Poland, Lithuania, Russia, and some other cultures. I don't know what happened for him these days. At that time, he was living in St. Petersburg, at least. So there is readiness to rethink about the Russian past, but still Moscow, Russia, and present Russia is a product of this history story. And therefore, I'm rather pessimistic about this.
Mikhail, do you agree with me that the Western view was heavily influenced by the traditional Russian way of looking at its history and kind of forgetting about Ukraine. And this has made a big difference in the debate in the West today.
Absolutely, I agree with that. The only caveat that I would have is that even in Ukraine, there is also competing discussions going on. But now we discuss Russia, and of course, it was imperial history,
yes.
And all the imperial peripheries were deprived of agency. So I totally concur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when it was Zhirinovsky of all people who came up with the idea that we could actually split this thing, and he wrote a personal letter to the Marshal of the Polish Sejm, that is the Speaker of the Polish Sejm, and something similar to the Slovaks and Hungarians, and said, "Come and take your part." So, and this was very much, of course, when Zhirinovsky said things, he was never a private person. He always reflected something which was extreme, but still was in the mainstream of the Kremlin.
I totally agree with what you said about Ukrainian history, but I would like to add that it concerns not only Ukraine, but even Belarus and republics of Central Asia and republics inside Russia, Karelia, I don't know, Tuva, which became part of the Soviet state much later than other republics, and so on. So all this, I don't know, history of all this, I don't know how to say, region, was the history in the shadow of Russia and of the Soviet Union. And Ukraine is an extreme case right now, but it concerns other countries as well.
Yeah,
Yes,
the big picture, of course, the Russian history is that Moscow historians wrote the basic story already hundreds of years ago. Yes. But then, since late 18th century, this more or less German type of national history was then distributed due to the church and primary education and political actions and so on everywhere. And it was very Moscow-centric. And also the Soviet system supported this development. Therefore, we have in West, abroad, very unified image of Russia and Russian past. This is what actually the Russian history is marketing. It is Moscow and how the other nations supported the Moscow development. Of course, this is not true, but this is the interpretation, and this is the official interpretation, and that we read, but that we read, unfortunately, also in the Western books.
Well, politics of history in Russia has long roots.
Yeah, but they are not so long. Actually, they are rather short. This 1,000 years old Russia, that is nonsense. As a professional historian, this was created in 18th century, more or less, this image. But it was adopted well to the history, but there are, as I in the very beginning said, that it's not unique, this interpretation. In Europe, there are many, many other nations which have also 1,000 years old roots.
Mikhail.
I agree with that, of course. Well, Russia was an empire, and maybe somebody would argue it still is, and imperial states has a problem with writing history generally. It's a general problem. But Russian case is just most acute, I think, because I think the other, I mean, many people probably disagree with that, but other imperial nations are not now invading any other countries with pretense of, uniting the former imperial glory. Sweden doesn't do it anymore. I think it's considered to be beyond the pale. But in the Russian case, a lot of this rhetoric of military expansion is completely legitimized. And kind of returning to your earlier point, of course, the debate about rethinking Russian history is completely out of question in Russia, because there is an article of the Criminal Code and again, that's what Alexandra said, that explicitly prohibits any secessionist interpretations. So if you would say that Ukraine had any credible case for being independent, you would be jailed.
Yeah.
So
Karenization of Stalin is probably also prohibited today to be discussed. Because I mean, Putin is right. I mean, Lenin is the culprit because he created Ukraine and he created a constitution that allowed secession. But Stalin was the one who created through Karenization the promotion of culture and language, not only in Ukraine but also in Karelia, which was very Finnish, Russian Finnish until it was eliminated.
Yeah, but here we are in the beginning that history
What
is...
did you say?
That we are here in the beginning that history is a very dangerous instrument in the hands of
we'll agree
politicians.
with that.
And
We'll
it
agree
has
with
been
that.
used, and therefore it's an obligation of historians try to a bit give a perspective that this is not true. This is not true in Russia, but it is not true anywhere else. So it should be not taken so serious. But if you have then the political system that you can put into jail all those who speak wrong history, then it's a political question and question of the political system and others. It's not history is not the guilty.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Should I open the discussion for questions from the audience? I would ask you to clearly identify your name and maybe where you come from. And I recognize the lady up there.
Thank you very much for your talk, Alexandra, and for a wonderful discussion.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm sorry, I'm Hanna Mazejka. I'm from the University of Turku.
Of Krakow, yes?
Turku.
Turku.
Turku, yes, not far from here. When I was listening to you, I was constantly thinking about Russian colonialism. You have tried to touch upon it, but it was very superficial. While, for example, the Soviet terror was one of the most important means to colonize other nations, like Holodomor in Ukraine, engineered to just kill the Ukrainian nation and to crush the national movement. Mass deportations from the Baltic states, from Western Belarus and Western Ukraine. Also, as far as I know, Finns were also deported. So all those means were aimed to colonize all those nations. And the current war in Ukraine is another manifestation of Russian colonial politics. And my question is, why Russian intellectuals and the Russian opposition are so unwilling to confront Russian colonialism, contemporary colonialism, and are so resistant to just to the discussions of decolonization of Russia. I mean, why other nations within the Russian Federation can't have their own voices, and why a lot of them are just from like less favorable nations, are dying at the war in Ukraine, killing Ukrainians, but the Russian opposition are just okay with that, and they don't really pay any attention to other nations within the Russian Federation.
Well, thank you.
Which is kind of repeating Putin's narrative.
Well, I mean, thank you. I mean, the question, of course, is Russia heading for dismemberment? I don't believe it. I don't see any popular popular rising, and I don't see any separatism inside Russia. If we leave the North Caucasus for a moment aside. I'm not interpreting your question, but I'm kind of trying to give it a spin.
Thank you very much for your question. So I cannot answer. You mentioned Russian intellectuals. I cannot answer for Russian intellectuals, but what whom I'm trying to cover somehow now is civil activists in different fields, and among civil activists in Russia, which are they are not so many, so they cannot influence totally the intellectual agenda and to be broader, and as Mikhail said, so the YouTubes are not for 10 million views, but for Russian activists who are, as for me, civil activists who are in somehow avant-garde of changes. So this is very, very important agenda, and it's discussion all the time, and I guess that Ukrainian case provoked this discussion among different activists from how to say, национальные республики в составе. But it's not like that. I mean, national republics, members or subjects of national minorities, in Russian Federation, and not only there, but. So I did, while showing the pictures of flowers, I showed the flowers in Sandarmoch, where this generation of killed rebirth, Ukrainian расстрелянное возрождение, where they were killed. And so last summer, a lot of activists read aloud Ukrainian poems of these poets, and they wrote in Ukrainian, and they were killed, so to kill Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian language, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian literature. And it was very important for activists to show this attempt of genocide, of colonize Ukraine, to make Ukraine Russia, and the struggle was exactly against it. And activists like 23rd of November, it was the memory day of victims of Holodomor in Ukraine, and activists in Russia, not many, but they put flowers to the memory of victims of Holodomor in Ukraine. So yes, you are totally right that the main attitude is still very imperial. But what I tried to show that some attempts it's tragic that the Nowadays catastrophe of Ukraine shed the light to the colonial past and contemporary colonial attempts of Russia. But my hope is that these processes somehow are discussing, developing in Russia.
Thank you very much. There's no doubt that the war in Ukraine and the ideas behind the war in Ukraine, the imperial claim, will have an impact on the Russian society long into the future. And it will also have an impact on the different subjects of the Russian Federation, which are still very, very. It's a mass. It's except for North Caucasus, there's not much movement. Of course, we have proud Tatarstan, but they were skillful in being proud and at the same time doing what is needed. Both Jukka, please.
Might one reason for this different kind of colonialism of Russia be that actually the colonialism wasn't the same as in the West? The Russian imperium, the state, was rather primitive until the mid-19th century. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church was put in the Moscow patterns during the 18th century, but Russian state was not very much interested in to integrate these areas of non-Christian populations before the 19th century. They just collected taxes and organized some kind of administration there. When it started, then it faced the situation that when in Western Europe there was a nationalism and the nation-building procedure, this did not take place so effectively in Russia. And then it faced the situation that Lenin national policy was actually very active. It built and formed new nations and gave their native languages and cultures, but in the framework of the Soviet Union, so that there was so to say, big Slavonic tree, brother nations, and then the supporting small nations, which had always the role from the perspective of Moscow. And basically, there are independent nations, but not in the same meaning as in the West.
So I think that's a very good point. And if we think about how Finland became part of the Russian Empire, never a part of Russia, something which is very often forgotten, but part of the Russian Empire, Russia was needed administrative cadres, and it used and was happy to use the existing systems, the Swedish system in Finland, as long as they were reliable and loyal to the emperor. This was the point. If your loyalty to the emperor was decisive, not the language you spoke or not the religion you practiced. Think about the Baltic Germans, what kind of a role they played in imperial Russia. They were then replaced through Bolshevik times by Jews, but that's a different story. Mikhail, would you like to come in? Okay. Well,
Agnes Haikara, tutkija Lapin yliopisto. Mä pyydän vähän apua alla sihteeri. Так как вопросы истории и политики взаимосвязаны, поэтому я решила поднять этот вопрос именно на этой площадке.
Да. Сейчас придется вас перевести, я так понял, потому что все не понимают по-русски. Мы как это сделаем? Лучше нет. Тогда давайте, да. Лучше так.
Okay, I'll try to translate your question into English as you speak.
Так как вопросы политики и истории взаимосвязаны, поэтому решила поднять этот вопрос на этой площадке.
Because politics and history are interrelated matters, I decided to raise this question here today.
В 2025 году была принята резолюция Европарламентом о нарушении гражданских прав в России.
In 2023, a resolution was adopted by the European Parliament concerning the violation of human rights in Russia.
Были приведены примеры нарушения гражданских прав. Это закрытие организации «Мемориал».
Examples of civil rights being violated included the liquidation of Memorial.
Дело Юрия Дмитриева «Сандармох».
Юрий Дмитриев affair concerning Sandarmokh.
И конфискация книг о судьбах польских финнов на Мурмане.
And the fate of my book about the persecuted Finns in the north of Russia near Murmansk.
In Murmansk.
Как мы знаем, летом текущего года произошел обмен политзаключенными между странами.
As you all know, last summer a big exchange of prisoners, including political prisoners, has taken place.
Финляндия оставила вопрос о защите руководителя Карельского мемориала Юрия Дмитриева.
So my question is, has Finland raised the question of exchanging or somehow protecting the leader of Karelian Memorial, Yuri Dmitriev?
Так как он достаточно много внес огромный вклад в сохранение истории.
This is a man who contributed a lot to the preservation of history.
И планируется ли обсуждение подобных вопросов в Финляндии?
So is any discussion planned in Finland concerning such issues?
Well, thank you very much. Let me answer in Russian. Вы поставили мне вопрос вчера, вот именно этот вопрос. У меня нет ответа. Я просто не представляю, значит, министерство. Я бывший. И поэтому, значит, я просто не знаю, какая там позиция. Well, you put the question to me last night, and I just don't have the answer. I'm not anymore. I'm a have been. I don't know how the ministry sees this, and did the embassy do something? I actually will I'll do my best to I'll ask. I'll try to get to the bottom of this. So the faith of Yuri Dmitriev is, of course, a big thing. It's a terrible thing. A man in his 70s being imprisoned, and well, I mean, the prison sentence he has is a sentence for life. So yes, thank you. Yes, your question is well noted, and you have a point. Thank you for that.
Hello, I am Riitta Mikkola from Finland. I'm a history teacher in just a normal school, and I would like to ask you a question about education. What's the role of the education? In Finland, we read about the new curricula of history in the school and so on. First of all, how do you see the role of education and the new curricula? Do you think it works really? Like the Soviet time, you had like this was what was taught and this was what was spoken in the kitchen. So like, do you see the same kind of thing? So does this new history curricula, does it really work? And what's the role of the education at schools?
Well, thank you very much. That's a good question. Is there a new Korotkaya Historia, Всесоюзная коммунистическая, whatever it was called, VKL, which is kind of the new thesis for students? Mikhail, would you like to come in?
Well, as far as I know, the education system has been really compromised with these conspiratorial narratives. Compromised, yes. Absolutely. The Medinsky book, and especially disturbing is the Junarmia movement, which I think are growing future soldiers for the future invasion.
What was the movement?
Junarmia, which is junior army.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of these young kids are brainwashed, basically, and some of them actually are volunteering to fight in the war already, as reaches the. So it's not as innocuous as it might seem, because there are some arguments that say that everything that Russia does is so ineffective and bad, and that everybody are treating it with disdain and skepticism, all the government efforts. I think that they are tremendously effective, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Yeah. This postmodern thing that there are no facts, that I was trying to say, there are only interpretations. And the denial of the Soviet atrocities or imperial atrocities, I think, transcend very easily to denial of atrocities in Ukraine. And that has been taught to kids to a certain extent. If you think that Great Terror in 1937 never existed, if there was no famine in Ukraine or Kazakhstan, then it's very easy to say that there were no Bucha. So it's really very easy mental step for a lot of people
And your point about the hacks occupying YouTube was well taken. Well, do I see yes?
Hello, my name is Dmitry Frolov from Aleksanteri Institute. I have a question to Alexandra. So just you mentioned that the archives of Memorial are unsafe, and just you are keeping it well, but actually, as you know, maybe, you know, so we have a project about the fates of the Finns in the Soviet Russia from 1917. So I do know that you collected a lot of materials from KGB, FSB archives, and are these archives of Memorial right now accessible? So just we're quite interested in these materials, and it will be nice to, if you can share with us.
The source, well, how to get to those archives. Dmitry Frolov has been working with very interesting and revealing archives lately in Baku, and also in Tashkent, if I'm right. And these are of course archives which include a lot of interesting material, especially in Baku concerning well, Finland and Sweden because of the Nobels. Alexandra, are the archives, you said they're accessible?
Yes, but you probably have heard that the main thing which Memorial collected was the private archives, so from families, from survivors, from the society. And regarding the archives from KGB and so on, and state archives, so it was only copies. And you can go to the website archive.memo.ru, and there you have navigation and you have search system. And these documents, this is work in progress. So it's not like we have digitalized all possible archives and now the work is done. It's work in progress. And so I don't know which document are you looking mostly on, and but otherwise you can contact our colleagues, and they, if they have any document, they can digitalize it sooner than they planned it. If not,
well, you said they're safe. The archives are safe. I mean, physically safe means they are safe.
Yes, they're safe.
I hope I understood you right.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, let's hope so.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Actually, me personally, we share responsibilities with my colleagues, and my own responsibility does not include archives and all these issues of digitalization. No. So, I just know. Everything which exists online or which I have heard, but it's better to contact them this group direct.
Archives is a very serious issue for all historians, and well, I mean the way, for example, the Soviet archives were copied and digitalized in the early 90s by the Americans, but also by the Finnish National Archive are great features. I mean, this is a lot of important things were captured. So, rukapisi nigariat. Do we have, yes, please, we have a gentleman over here.
I'm Pavel Petrov, master student at the University of Helsinki. First of all, thank you for this stimulating presentation and the panel. You touched upon the issue of processing and analyzing history of Russia, or like this or memory politics, adjusting them, trying to use history properly. Let's say, but in terms of processing the Soviet past and Soviet crimes, so if we imagine the Russia or the near future where it's possible to critically discuss the Soviet past, how do you think the growing temporal distance to those events and the absence of this generation of experience will affect the discussion and maybe also the ongoing war? Maybe that will be like more burning issue to process and to analyze, and it ultimately will again maybe like put the processing of the Soviet past aside.
I'm not sure I got the gist of your question. It's my problem. I just didn't how it will impact on. I mean,
the processing of the Soviet past, the ongoing war.
Yeah. Well, this is of course what is the effect of the ongoing war. I mean, yeah. Well, gentlemen, Alexandra. It's a difficulty. This is what we're thinking of. Jukka, give it a try.
But I just started to think that once again that was Soviet Union some kind of extraordinary phenomenon? Usually people they speak that it was Soviet time, that was year zero, and then it's a new Russia. But actually, I have always thought that the Soviet Union was one period in Russian history, an odd period among many other odd periods, and not the oddest one.
Well, you have to go very far back.
Yeah, I go far. I'm minimalist, but still, I mean, therefore, to think the Soviet past in this framework does not work. I mean, do the people think they are Russians? Also, the extra-nationalists, they are Russians. They think that Soviet Union was a Russian phenomenon, one form of Russia. Therefore, I don't think that it has very big impact. But that's just a guess. I don't know.
Well, I suppose I can agree that this was a period in the long run of Russian history. The Soviet Union was one thing, but it's so close to us that we can't deny its importance, and it's with us still today.
Yeah, but still, Soviet Union was very much alike the other periods. It was very Russian. So that the
now we're getting into it.
It was one form of Russia.
Right. I think there's coffee waiting for us. If you don't mind, I would like to thank Alexandra and I would thank. And my friend Jukka, Mikhail and Jukka. Thank you very much.
So in this panel we discuss about again that how Russia has shifted to use history in politics, and we have 4 panelists. Each of them have about 5-10 minutes time for the first round talk, and then after that they will have a possibility to comment each other's 1 or 2 rounds, and after these comments and rounds, I open floor for your questions and comments as well. That you have a chance to participate this discussion. We have here Ilja Solomes at the moment. Living in Vilnius, and I'm from the European Humanities University. I know Ilja from Petrozavodsk from 30 years ago. We met first time when we did research over there. Katerina Suverina, University of Constance from Germany. Kati Parpei, lecturer of the University of Eastern Finland, and Kirill Levinson from Vilnius as well. So strong delegation from Vilnius today. And I suggest that we start on this order what is on the program. So Ilja, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Markku. Well, indeed, we are two here from Vilnius, but if we calculate in another way, three of us are from Russia, and one from Pohjois Karjala. Okay, so the point is that much depends on how you calculate. I've been teaching at Petrozavodsk State University for something like 30 years prior to the time when I had to leave. I decided to leave the country, and now I think I am settled in Vilnius. At least I hope so. I was delighted when I got an invitation to take part in this event, to have a talk on politics of history, namely in Russia. When talking about politics of history, we should first probably define what we understand as politics. My reading of the way how we could deconstruct this notion, meaning politics of nation, of history, or politics as such, is that one should define first goals of those politics, then mechanisms and instruments of achieving, implied to achieve these great goals. Then you have to look at a roadmap, a road leading to this great goal, and then sequence of undertakings just to implement your great idea. Then you have to reflect on the results of your politics, intermediate results, reevaluate, readapt, readjust, whatever. Keeping this set of issues in mind helps to avoid underestimating politics of history as a plain set of events. Just forgetting about it, we are talking about politics. Gradual but, steady, definitely steady turn in politics of history in Russia started to become visible in the very, very beginning of this century, of this millennium, if you prefer that. Not yesterday, not last week, not in 2022, but long ago. It was a part of a more general turn towards establishing a more centralized system of political governance in post-Soviet Russia. Well, we all know that the trademark brand of this set of politics, vertical of power, or power vertical. Quite automatically, this involved, limitations of democratic practices in all spheres, including closer. Yes, thank you. including production of knowledge, production of history knowledge as well. And among all, a very strong strive to establish non-pluralistic vision of production of history knowledge and history at large. After that, we have seen several stages of development of this project, as it was called, a unified, like one example, a unified school textbook, history textbook, with an overall goal to monopolize history, definitely. Well, history, does history matter? Or it doesn't matter, but it was a clearly loudly articulated approach. History is a kind of universal tool of establishing a new Russian identity. So we can talk about new approaches in teaching history at school, new university and school curricula. We can talk about politics towards sites of memory, towards museums, towards whatever. But we have to keep in mind all the time that we cannot examine these issues separately. They are part of larger context, larger politics, and this could be traced both on national, that is, all Russian level, and on local levels. Thank you.
Ilja. And Katerina, please, it's your turn.
So, thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Yeah, thank you. I would like to continue this topic about conspiracy theories and paranoia, because I think it's really important, because most of the academics, they still kind of this funny attitude towards, conspiracy theory, because they truly believe that nobody in their mind will ever have believed that this kind of a discourse will be accepted. But look at the American elections, and I also would like to connect it to a very right now important topic of decolonization and decolonial methods that most of the Slavic studies and scholars who are particularly focused on Russia try to avoid. This paranoia is very popular because, from my point of view, the collective Russian or Russophone identity was based on sort of cultural trauma, which is created artificially. And when you artificially created a sort of trauma, let's say like we have a great past and we lost it and we'll have to go back and to get it back, it's really difficult to sort of to emphasize the idea of decolonial past. It's really difficult to create this kind of a narrative, a popular narrative, which will help people to understand why we have to decolonize the Soviet history. Because first of all, they don't know how to deal with the reality because they don't have any reality. They have this kind of a paranoid vision of this reality, and they don't know how to deal with it. So that is why the kind of a conspiracy theory helps them to cope with it. So that is why they do not believe in this, in the war crimes in Ukraine. So that is why they do not believe in political repressions, and they do believe that the government, sometimes most of them, or at least the majority of the Russian society, they still think that their government is doing a kind of a right things. So, and when you then the reality is absent, we have to be really careful in terms of methods and narratives that we choose to speak to people about this past. And I'm not trying to say that we have to abandon the colonial methods, no. But I would like to pay your attention to kind of a non-academic methods, like literature, for instance. And if we look at the Russophone contemporary literature, which is not necessarily published in Russia, but it's also published in Kazakhstan, it's also published in Belarus, it's published in Uzbekistan, in any other different countries, they're trying to create a kind of a personal narrative, and they're trying to rethink the past. For instance, I really like ideas of Oksana Vasyakin. Her novels was translated to Finnish, actually English and German, where she tried to approach a very difficult memory of 1990s and tried to tell the personal narrative. Another example is Igana Jabarova, who is trying to decolonize because she writes in Russian. And at the same time, she has a really different ethnical and cultural identity, and she's trying to, sort of emphasize this kind of idea that there are different kind of identities exist, and how we can approach this kind of knowledge, and how we can use decolonization in order to sort of debunk paranoia. But these kind of voices are quite rare, unfortunately. But I do believe that scholars who are focusing on Russophone studies will closely look at contemporary Russophone literature and another non-academic practices in order to learn how we can use these kind of methods, because I think that harsh criticism will not go into work. And this harsh criticism is, from my point of view, will not help to base the dialogue that we need right now, and will not help to base the kind of a critical theory that we will use in the future in order to think about how we can deal with the past, and how we can avoid this idea of unmastered past, which is what were really popular in during the German era, which is still popular among Slavic studies specialists. They still use this kind of idea in order to avoid dealing with this past because it's unmastered. How we can deal with it, yeah, and. Well, I think it's my time is over here.
So thank you, Katerina. Kati, it's your turn.
Yes,
please.
Thank you very much. I have to say that for a historian interested in the political uses of the past, the last few years have been quite busy, unfortunately. What I've been doing is that I've been going through the texts published by a society called Russian Military Historical Society online, because they seem to provide very good insight into the formation and maintenance of the so-called official Russian national narrative, and how it is put into full use for contemporary political purposes and for manipulation of historical memory that Alexandra was talking about. And even though, I don't know if you know about this society, but even though there are many historical societies in Russia, the Military Historical Society is the one who can be said to be closest to the Kremlin. It was founded by the presidential decree in 2012, and to develop and support patriotic education in Russia. And it has its own share in the state budget, and it's also funded by big Russian companies. And the current chairman of that society is Vladimir Medinsky, that you already heard about. And he's the former Minister of Culture, and he can be said the most prominent figure in promoting the state monopoly in history. He has been carrying out that school textbook reform, and also he has been very active in popularizing this state-approved historical views to the masses, so to say. Medinsky has stated that useful myths are more important than historical facts, and that only validation for historical research is the national interest of Russia. Also, he has called the Western-style multivocality in historical research ridiculous, and said that there should be a canonical understanding of Russian history instead of this cacophony. So these points give quite a good view of his starting points as some kind of self-appointed state historian. Russian Military Historical Society appears to be a society of professional academic historians, a society of experts, but in fact it's primarily a state-run propaganda tool for pseudo-historical propaganda. But as such, its role is important in today's Russia, as you can see, because for instance, teaching of proper kind of history has been announced to be crucial even for the state security. Since the spring 2022, the active members of the Military Historical Society have been occupied by justifying the special military operation in their writings published online and blaming the West for everything that has ever gone wrong for Russia. But increasingly, and this is what I want to say a couple of words about, the need for a new state ideology for Russia has been discussed online by those active members. And the role that history and historical research should have in the formation and maintenance of that new state ideology. Aligned with the attempts to whitewash problematic periods in Russian history and to reject the neoliberal Western values, the discussants have called for positive or idealist view on history, or a positive history of the state. And this, according to them, should form the basis for a new paradigm in historical research, a paradigm they call a state patriotic turn. And what does this positive history of the state mean? One of the discussants explained that the historian should aim to understand the idea behind every deed. And even though the deeds may not be acceptable for modern people, the purpose behind them is what the historian should be focused on. And it's quite easy to see that this refers, for instance, to Stalin's politics and the repressions. And in this regard, another author gave the organization Memorial as an example of spreading the false image of USSR as a terrorist state and rehabilitating Nazi criminals. So what we have this attempt to create a new paradigm for historical research in Russia. And of course, we know that in practice, this exploitation of the past and this cherry picking of history, so to say, is the course that has been taken in practice for the last decade or so, or even longer, as Ilya said. But now, the discussants favoring and representing this state monopoly on history are openly promoting it as an academic effort, as this state patriotic turn. And they promote it as essential turn for the formation for this new state ideology. And of course, this trend of forming a state-controlled historical paradigm aims to consolidate that canonical understanding of Russian history, that is a univocal national narrative, which cannot be criticized or challenged in any way. And it also attempts to isolate Russian historians in this pseudo-academic, even totalitarian system, which will allow producing only impressive stories about Russia's past for the use of the state. In one of the texts recently published by the Russian Military Historical Society, one of the discussants called or he said that the Western-minded or the liberal-minded historians in Russian universities were actually called internal enemies of the state, which is quite drastic. And maybe even more importantly, this trend or turn, when forcibly carried out, denies people the right for their own past and the experiences of their families. When traumatic periods of history are being whitewashed and presented as positive history of the state. So here we have the state monopoly on memory. And in the long run, of course, this is destructive development on the level of the society as well as the level of individuals, and of course in the level of international relations as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Kati. And Kirill, please.
Is it okay? Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm speaking here today in a double capacity as a member of the Vilnius branch of Max Weber Research Network Eastern Europe, which means as a historian, and as a teacher at Gulliver Academy, a private educational institution in Vilnius, as a teacher, which leads to a certain schizophrenia in my attitude towards the problem we are facing, because as a historian, I do believe that we should continue fighting for the historical truth to be restored concerning, for example, who were the perpetrators of the Katyn massacre, who is buried in Sandamoch, etc. Like the hot topics that have been contested recently by the Medinsky clique, and we need to continue opposing the Medinsky paradigm. We need to fight against the state monopoly on historical knowledge. We should destroy this state monopoly and bring in other perspectives, the colonial perspective, with all the problems that Katerina has tackled, and other views, other points of view, other interpretations. Yes, sure, this all needs to be done, even though it is currently almost impossible within Russia to publish such studies. They still can be published online from outside Russia and be available for readers in and outside Russia alike. At the same time, as a teacher, I do believe that we should add to this something completely, well, seemingly opposite. And that is, we should strive for a reorientation, especially of the young generation of students in Russia, as well as in the exiled communities of Russian immigrants outside Russia, a reorientation towards a concern about the future. I think one of the very big problems that our society is facing is the absence of any future visions. This is what sociologists, pollsters have found many years ago, that people in Russia, no matter what their political stand is, lack a vision of the future. If asked what kind of future they imagine, they either say, not sure, or they project their present into the future. They continue it into the future, as if this present state could and should long forever, last forever. Or they hope for their golden age past, for their imagined brilliant past to come back in the future, like the Soviet Union will be restored, will be loved, feared, and respected again. The industries will run again. People will again have healthcare and education for free, and there will be again sausage for 2 rubles 90 kopecks a kilogram, and so on. So this is, of course, not a realistic vision of future. If a person has a vision of their own future, a concern, a major concern is about the future rather than about the past, this is possibly a factor that could contribute to this person being less susceptible to the very seductive, very comforting, very consoling, very sweet propaganda tricks, focusing on their own future, on the future of one's family, of a small collective, small group based on what Emil Durkheim called organic solidarity rather than mechanic solidarity of a nation, is something that could possibly make young people better citizens, and at an elder age, when they become voters, they could perhaps think about the future rather than about the past when giving their votes to parties as soon as elections are reestablished in Russia again, which I do believe is going to happen sooner or later. So we should work to restore the truth, to oppose the Medinsky paradigm, and we should also work to reorient the young generation towards the future. How can we do this? I think we should admit that books are something, textbooks, history books, are mostly efficient as far as middle and older generations are concerned. Speaking of the younger generations, we should admit that their principal channel of information consumption is no longer reading, it's watching. And that's one of the reasons why, as Mikhail has rightly pointed out, the number of viewers for those history channels on YouTube is above 1 million. Whereas the readership of even the best-selling books is always below 500,000. So we'll have to compete with Medinsky on the web, on the internet, using formats that are really working, like podcasts, memes, TikToks, all sorts of things that people of my generation cannot even appreciate, to say nothing of making them. So this is a work that has to be done by younger historians, younger teachers, younger artists, and our possible role in creating them could be, at best, that of consultants. I think I will finish now. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a good start for the first round. And my question is, or I give floor to you to comment now to each others. Did you get something in your mind you want to comment or continue? Please, Kati.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to comment on Kirill's point about this past and future. I like very much about this concept of historical awareness, which kind of refers to a person's personal relationship with the past, but also with the present and the future. And it means that instead of some state-driven historical representations from above, a person, especially young person, but also older persons, should kind of develop this personal relationship, and they should be given tools and materials for doing that. And I think that developing that personal historical awareness is something that, for instance, the state in Russia is trying to prevent people from doing. they prefer people who have this historical amnesia in a way. They don't want people to think about the past or the present or the future. So in a way, I don't find this past and future contradictory in this way, but they are kind of complementing each other. They are contributing to each other. And at the moment, what, for instance, the state is doing in Russia is putting plaster on an abscess. And as long as the abscess is there, the infection, the infected wound is there, it's really difficult to, to see anything positive in the future also with the younger generation. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to say that I completely agree with you. There is no actual contradiction between the two. It's a seeming one. And I do think that people, persons, individuals need to deal with their family's past, with their family history. And of course, it gives them a very, very personal and genuine awareness of history. And this might be one of the reasons why the authorities, well, not prohibited, but suppressed the contest of historical studies made by students, men in history, Russia in the 20th century, which had been initiated by Memorial and produced dozens of brilliant studies done by secondary school students every year. And this is suppressed now. Special service officers go into schools and tell history teachers not to participate in this contest because it allows young people to face the horrible truth of their family history, or sometimes to find their inspiration for individual action, for autonomy, for personal freedom, for non-statist values. Yes, the past is a vast reservoir of all possible arguments, identifications, reasons for action or inaction. You can find anything in your own past as well as in the past of your nation. But I think that dealing with your own past, as important as it is, should be complemented with dealing with your own future, not allowing the state to take the initiative in defining the people's future for them.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the situation in Russia is really difficult and terrible, but there are still publishing books. There are still issuing some kind of really interesting narratives, and they trying to oppose this paranoid reality without future, without the past, and without the present by personal narratives. And that's what the conversation that we had yesterday. I would like to mention a very it's a young adult novel which is called The Summer in the Red Scarf, Лето в пионерском галстуке. It's a queer novel that was published. The print run of this novel is 400,000 copies. It was enormously popular among young generation, and it tried to kind of deal with the queer stigma, which is supported by the Russian authorities. And so they of course they banned the novel and put the foreign agent label to their authors, but it's still circulating in the Russian segment of the internet. They're still reading this novel. They still would like to know about themselves and to know how to deal with their sexual identity. And so I think it's really important to understand that there is something. Even in these dark times, we have something inside this, inside Russia that help people, and we also have to focus or have to pay our attention to these kind of initiatives in order to maybe in the future to think how we can refer to them in order to support this kind of also resistant narrative. Because if we continue to say that there is no resistant narrative, it's really, I mean, will be not true, I think. Yeah.
I come back to this question what Kati and Kirill raised up about the time dimension and writing to history. The time is, of course, if we are speaking about the political use of history, or intended use of history, according to Reinhard Koselleck, who has been, I mean, cited many times, his idea is that this political use of history is happening so that, and that is the question of the future expectations, that we are writing and creating today history and this narration of the past towards the expectations of the future, expectations which we have. And I start to be a little curious when you, Kirill, said that Russians, they don't have future or picture of the future. They don't have, they don't think about it, but that they are looking like a pack. But still history is interpreted all the time in the society, and for sure you have described it that what at least Kati described it one way how the government and the Putin's regime is trying to create the history and the new state, this patriotic turn of the state and state ideology. And there is the some understanding what do they want, what kind of future they want, and the history, state history is for sure, we can see that written towards it and to along that side. But if the population doesn't have any kind of wishes or picture or hopes or whatever of the future, it's what kind of stories are coming up from there. In any case, and this leads to the question that how do you think that, what is the role, it was discussed or mentioned already during the first panel discussion, the role of popular culture and oral culture, I mean telling family stories, narrations, and history writing, I mean textbooks, plus I mean real academic research. How do you estimate that from where the people pick up their knowledge? I mean population, if we are talking about it. You, Kirill, mentioned already that YouTube. and it was a little bit desperate statement that we should rely on memes and put younger generation historians to write the memes and what kind of the history it is after that. But is it really so that there is nothing else to do? Ilya?
Well, I should say that rank and file Russian would switch on his TV set, channel 1 and channel 2. That's it.
There was a study conducted a couple of years, well, it's actually more than 5 years ago already, as to what sources of information concerning history people use. It was in Yekaterinburg in the Urals. And the researchers have found out that as soon as the local past is concerned, people take a lot of information from their family history. They tell stories from their grandparents' biographies. They dig out letters, postcards, and books from their attics and basements of their homes. So they deal with the family past first and foremost. But as soon as the national or the international history is concerned, most people rely on grand narratives as delivered by school books or TV channels and state-run or state-monopolized historical narratives. That's the way it is. So for people to become more autonomous, we should, of course, promote their preoccupation with family history, with local history, with regional history, with ethnic history. Speaking of small ethnic groups, like the history of their colonization and their struggle against colonization. This is what makes people less dependent on the Medinsky paradigm. Whereas if we try to teach young students history using lectures or long films or long reads, texts are not even classified as books now, they're reads, long reads, short reads. My experience as a teacher shows that most students, 10th grade students, 11th grade students today are not keen on reading more than one paragraph a day. And if they are forced to read 3 pages, they are unable to remember what was in the beginning when they finish. So this functional illiteracy is spreading very rapidly. And within years, or maybe within 1 or 2 generations, we're going to have, well, a majority of non-reading citizens. So the only way to access this huge audience is to follow its preferences as to the channels, how to get information. It's visual, sometimes it's audio, but in short formats. This is something that also raises moral issues. For example, this content, this web content, these memes and stuff are often funny, amusing. Can we, as moral citizens, say amusing things about the Holocaust, about Holodomor, about genocide, about Stalinism in general? My conscience, my conscience as a person, as a citizen, says, no, we shouldn't make any jokes about that. But looking at the example of Germany, for example, I see that there have been very successful, artistically very well made graphic novels, such as The Mouse, for example, and films, comedies, very successful and still historically, well, okay. So there are ways to address audiences which abhor dark truth, unpleasant truth, boring truth. There are ways to address such audiences, and we need to think as marketers of history. To market our historical knowledge, we need to make decisions that are not in keeping with our conscience. Sure, it's a very bitter and sad truth, but I think we'll have to do it if we are to, well, not even to win, but not even to win the war against the Medinsky paradigm, but to win a couple of arrière-garde battles with it.
Now we are actually talking about different levels of history, because what you was now describing and with these memes and YouTubes and so forth is so-called the popular part of the history, what is the, circulating among the population, and at the different level is of course then so-called academic narrations or writing of the history and this and how do you think that, what is the state of the academic history at the moment? In the last panel it was said that, okay, it's doing well. There are good historians and I don't doubt about it. But what is actually the, freedom of the, to do within the university and within the community academic history? research. Archives has been more or less restricted during the past years, and there are that kind of state policy, like we heard, and we know that Russian researchers also who have got a grant from abroad, they can be foreign agents or treaters and so forth, but to what extent it influenced to the research, history research has been done inside Russia at the moment. Is it degenerating, or is there spaces of the freedom still, some small or big one?
Well, I have left Russian academia 2 years ago, but for what I know, it certainly depends on the topic you're working on. If it's a hot topic, like 20th century Soviet history, Second World War, Stalin time and stuff, you will be facing immense difficulties if you try to publish something or to defend a doctoral thesis. And cases are known of people facing very, very hard suppression on the part of academic institutions when they tried to defend unorthodox points of view. But if you're doing like Middle Ages or antiquity or African history, archaeology and stuff, there is much more freedom. And some people even say they don't sense any pressure at all. They keep working as before. There is no pressure, no dictate, nothing. So it largely depends on the topic. And even though many researchers who work in the Soviet history field, like Oleg Khlevnyuk, for example, are subject to, potentially subject to limitations and punishment and so on, they still manage to publish books. They still manage to deliver lectures. They still manage to give talks on television. Well, not on television, on web channels and so on. So there is still some freedom, some academic, maybe dwindling, maybe very little as compared to what we had in the 90s. But there are still ways to bring across your message. The question is how many people would read those books, how many people would watch those YouTube reels and talks. And there we have a very, very, very objective indicator, like the number of copies sold or the number of viewers, number of followers. And, well, it's good that a book can be published, but it's sad that it's not bought, not read.
What about others? Kati?
Yeah, actually, I don't have any answers. I have a follow-up question to my colleagues. What do you think? Was it the right policy to cut all the cooperation with Russian colleagues? Because, for instance, I participated in a very good project. It was a German-Russian project. It had a very, in a good way, very critical starting point, and very good critical research was being made. For instance, on memory and on also national images of something and so forth. But then it was the cooperation was halted. And I think it was a bit sad because of these very good critical studies that were being made. But what do you think? Should there be cooperation with Russian colleagues in Russia at the moment?
Let's give Ilya the next speech. You can answer or previous or this or give your own ideas.
I will start with my own before I forget it. Let's return to our Earth. Let's think about economy of knowledge production. Who pays? Now, Russian researchers, be it humanities or social sciences or whatever, well, they're sources of money support, of economic support. The scope is very limited. There are no options of receiving money from the West, from abroad at all. And within Russia, either the state is paying for your work or private foundations, those who are also controlled by the state. So when we are talking about monopolization of knowledge production, it's also about these issues, pure economy. We must not forget about it. Yes, about cooperation. My answer would be yes. We should maintain contacts. We should maintain cooperation. Just for the sake of one plain thing, to support those who are still in Russia. Let it be cooperation on grassroots level, not formalized, not whatever. But I think the point is that we have to maintain it, to keep it.
Do you want to take a...
Well, there is a different way to maintain this cooperation, because there are lots of academics right now in relegated, for instance, to Kazakhstan or to any other countries, and we can have this kind of a cooperation there, because they still have archives in terms of, for instance, if you are focusing on the Soviet history, there are beautiful and very rich archives in Kazakhstan, because I mean, like, all the papers have been copied, yeah, and you can find them there, and at the same time there are a lot of people who relocated there, and they would like to continue to this kind of work. And in terms of, well, it will be safer in terms of institutional cooperation, because I mean, there is a ban for institutional cooperation, for Russian institutional cooperation, and I do support this kind of a ban, because I mean, like, all of them are state funded, yeah, and most of the countries decided not to cooperate with the state-funded kind of institution, which is understandable. But on the personal level, yeah, on the other side, if you would like to cooperate with the institution, you can cooperate with this kind of institution in, I don't know, in Kazakhstan, for instance. Some people in Georgia, they're also teaching or working there. Some people are working in Uzbekistan. There are different kind of international organizations who moved to neighbor countries.
Yes,
what I would like to add is that, of course, it would be immoral to support Putin's war with money. So, principally, yes, but I am against it when it turns into idiocy and hypocrisy. Governments that continue running business with Russia, profiting from trade with Russia, importing, exporting, giving billions of benefits to Russian companies, buying oil and gas and arms and timber and whatsoever from Russian companies, like are fueling Russian budget with billions of euros or dollars. And then they say, no, you should not give 2,000 euros to a researcher who will give this money to an archive in fees for copying documents. That's idiotic and hypocritical.
All right. Before we take audience in, I would like to ask you to make a brief definition. What do you mean on when you are speaking about decolonization of history? I mean, it's for sure on the field of the history politics. And after that, my question is that when it is, and when the decolonization of history and the conducting history is on the field of history politics, that means that there is a special purpose. So what is the expectation of the future? What is the consequences of it? What do we want if we think about it? And there are different definitions at the moment among the not only historians, but whole academic community, that what does it mean? It comes, of course, like we all know, that it comes from the 1950s, 60s, from the Europe and the real colonial European states, criticism of these states and the research community and Side's famous book and so forth and so forth. But what is in our context? How do you define it? And what is the purpose? This is what we want to get for it. And is it more the statement for the, political target what we want to get, or is it real methodology? To what extent? Please.
Yeah, it's a very important question from our point of view, and I would like to refer here to Frantz Fanon in his wonderful book, a very personal one, Black Skin and White Mask. And he said that if we are talking about decolonization and in decolonization, the history, we have to consider every problem from the standpoint of time. So we have to understand we are here in the present time. And first of all, we belong to our past, and we cannot avoid it. And so if we're talking about, for instance, Soviet Union, so many people would like from Slavic Studies Academy, they are writing articles about Soviet Union and specifically referring to Moscow and St. Petersburg. And they, I understand the purpose, yeah, that there is always better to have a title like about Soviet Union or something like this, but you have to be honest with yourself. It's about Moscow. If it's about Moscow, call the spade the spade. Be honest with yourself, first of all, and give others kind of a space to talk about their culture. Give others space to research their culture, yeah, and to establish this kind of a dialogue between each other. And the dialogue, from my point of view, is really important. That's what I also, that's what Fanon highlighted, actually, in his book. He said, like, it's not a problem only for sort of decolonizators. It's also the problem for the colonized people to kind of talk to each other and to understand how we can deal with this past and how we can establish a community which can listen, first of all, and then which can have an opportunity to speak to each other. And this is, from my point of view, it's really important.
Yeah. Decolonization of history, I see it as just deconstructing or unraveling these dominant narratives, like, for instance, in the case of Russia, they are like imperialistic narratives. But I've been studying the formation of mental images, and mental images are like perceptions of things in our heads. And they are subconscious. They are formed on subconscious level. And it's actually very difficult, very strenuous process to become aware of those images in our heads. And I think that reconstruction of history has to take place also on individual level, that we all have to become aware of all those images and perceptions that we have in our heads. Because many of them are formed according to those dominant historical narratives that we have learned in school. We have absorbed them from around us and so forth. So it takes place on many levels. On the level of research, on the level of general discourse, but also on individual level. And it doesn't concern only historians. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with what both of you have said, and picking up your ideas as I understood them, I would say that in order to be able to deliver a decolonized discourse to the public, you need to be listened to. You need to like condition your to prepare your public to hear certain things. The words colonialism, colonization, and so on used to be neutral in the 19th century Russian historical literature. Like the colonization of Siberia was just like, well, appropriation of lands and its riches and so on. During the Soviet time, it became a bad word because this is what the imperialists, the bad guys, the capitalists did to the poor peoples of Africa, Asia, and so on. And what we, the good guys, the Soviets, helped these people to so we are the good guys, and this is the subconscious image of well, most humans, I would say. And this is also a very important thing for people who don't have anything to be proud of as persons. Yeah? We are the good guys. We as the Russian people, we as the Russian state, we as the Russian civilization have always been the good guys. We've brought education, railways, hospitals, factories, schools to those wild indigenous peoples. And now you call us the bad guys, the colonizers? No, we're not the bad guys. We're not the colonialists. Yeah, we are, so on and so on. So if you try to say, we Russians have colonized the Chukchis, the Yakuts, and so on, you'll immediately face with resistance. Yeah. So the work has to start at a different level, not touching this positive self-image, but looking for other ways to circumvent this resistance. Because now, if you try to say we colonized Alaska and killed tens of thousands of indigenous Aleuts and Algonkins and Kwakiutls and so on, so nobody would listen, because Alaska is ours. Yeah? Americans took it from us and we should get it back. That's the predominant point, because we are the good guys. So we need to find ways to make this decolonized view somehow acceptable for the mass consciousness. And at the moment, I don't see such a way. It needs to be found.
Well, decolonizing history. Yes, we are good guys. And yes, we have to make Alaska great again. But speaking seriously, what we have to do if and when we decide to decolonize history? Well, first we have to, in a way, decentralize grand narratives, make them less state-oriented, make grand narratives more about history of people or peoples. That's better. Less state-oriented and state-centralized history writing. Then we have to listen to the voices of subalterns. I take it as quite inevitable. Actually, these two steps, that's very easy. But, I totally agree with Kati. as well as with Kirill, with the exception that the term, the notion of colonization became negative during the early Soviet times. Already in 1920s, 1930s, it was neutral. You can find articles and even books about colonization of, say, Kola Peninsula, that is integrating its economical potential, and colonization of Far East. That was still neutral in social and economic history.
Yeah, this is a question of the history of concepts. And yes, but let's take the audience in. I think that we have several questions over there behind Dmitry, and then over you, Sirkka. Yes.
Thank you very much for the very interesting conversation, discussion, and thank you very much for yours, Markku, question, what is decolonization? So what's the difference between the decolonization, rethinking history, or researching for history? What is the difference, or is it any difference? Because just all these terms are quite, up to me, the same.
Let's take also from Sirkka.
My question is more concrete. It was Kirill who told about the problems of scholars who want to do research into the Soviet period. My question is now, is there a kind of decreasing or increasing interest in doing research into the Soviet period compared to older or more recent periods? And as the kind of frame question, is there willingness in Russian society to take responsibility for the past?
To your first question, I don't have an answer. I do not know how many researchers currently want to take Soviet time topics for their studies as compared to like 5 years ago or 20 years ago. I don't have the statistics, so I can't answer it. Concerning your second question, whether the society is willing to take up responsibility for whatever, the answer is no. And it is not because the Russian society today is bad. It is my principal conviction. It's something I've been taught to think, that societies don't act as persons. Societies don't want anything. Societies don't feel anything. Societies don't eat, don't sleep, don't dance, don't fear, don't laugh. They are not persons. So there are individuals or groups or associations in societies. There are opinions that are more widespread or less widespread in societies. So in Russia today, there are persons, groups, opinions that are, well, willing to take responsibility for many things, including the full-scale invasion of Ukraine starting 2022, or the war in Ukraine that started in 2014, or the colonization of Ukraine that started in Catherine the Great's time, or whatever. And this is not a majority. There are other currents, other widespread or less widespread opinions, attitudes, points of view, and so on. And answering your question, why the liberal opposition in Russia today avoids speaking of colonization and so on and so on. I think one of the reasons, it's my guess, one of the reasons is it is because it's political opposition. They still think that someday they will be voted for in a future election. So for people to rally around them, they need to mind what people like or don't like to hear. And if a politician, a would-be politician today, starts saying, we have colonized Alaska, we have colonized Ukraine, we have colonized Buryatia, we have colonized Tuva, he'll probably get one vote, that of his wife or her husband or whatever, no more. So because they're politicians, they need to think what their potential voters would like to hear from them.
Yeah, I would like to continue the idea that Hannah Arendt in her essay about the collective guilt, Hannah Arendt in her essay, Personal Responsibility Under the Dictatorship, she said that there is no such thing as collective guilt. You cannot. It means that nobody is responsible for anything. You have to pick people, and you have to do it in a proper legal way to do some kind of things. Who did the decisions? Who signed some kind of the papers? You cannot blame 80% of the people who are living at the margins of the poverty. They don't know how to buy shoes for their kids. They don't know how to live tomorrow, and they don't know this kind of they cannot be responsible for some things. They can't be responsible for assaulting the neighbor, of course, because they did this kind of thing. I think I am responsible for the things that right now is happening in academia, because I was I don't know, flying in the skies during 2010s and trying to build kind of a inclusive society, and didn't understand one in particular thing, that I have to understand how to talk to the average audience, because all the academics will live in a kind of a botanic garden, I would say. We can share our opinions here. We can kind of have a discussion, and in order to deliver public speech, you should have a certain tools. You should change your kind of language. And you have to be really careful about this. And I think this specifically in terms of a collective guilt, it doesn't work. You have to pick the people, and you have to understand that there are people who are responsible for these things because they did something, and they did it because they have power to do this kind of things. And I don't think that simple people in Russia have power right now. And I don't think that they did have this kind of a power. And answering to Dima's question, well, there are different kind of approaches, like queer studies, decolonial studies, cultural studies, and most of them have kind of a difference, Decolonial and post-colonial studies even have difference, because decolonial studies is about, it's about subalterns. It's about giving the voice to people who didn't have an opportunity to speak. I don't know, women, ethnic minorities, and other subaltern groups. And I think we can rethink history in a different ways. And the decolonial way is one of the way, and one of the important way to rethink the history. We can rethink the history in the queer way. I think you you might get it. What I'm trying to say. So I think that there is a difference, and we have to understand it. Yeah, because if we think that we're thinking the history and decolonizing the history is the same thing, so that means that I can speak for I don't know, for people from Siberia, but I don't. I do not have this right to speak on their behalf. And this, I think, is really important to understand that this is what decolonization, from our point of view, means.
Yeah, I just want to make a small addition that history provokes very strong emotions, and that's a universal thing. And for instance, in Finland, we like to say that, okay, Russians can't face their difficult past and so forth. But in Finland, when there have been discussions like about the colonization of the Sami people, or for instance, the bad things that Finnish soldiers did while in the SS troops, the resistance is huge. People get very angry about those accusations in a way. So we are no different from Russians in that sense, that even Finns are not so eager to face the awkward sides of our history. It's emotional. Yeah.
Ilya, do you want?
Just to illustrate what Katja has just said. Imagine me confronting you now, you people sitting in this room, confronting you with accusation of tolerating anti-Semitism in the university. Would we be pleased to hear that? During the coffee break, there was an anti-Semitic rally in the same building. I witnessed it. I went there, I looked at them, I listened to them. It was, well, a very weird thing, like feminist anti-Zionism, yeah? With Palestinian flags and sort of, yeah, and they talked about Zionists coming in and where they should confront them and stuff. And I would say, you are responsible for letting this happen. Would any one of you say, yes, we are responsible, we bear the responsibility for anti-Semitism spreading in Finnish academia? No, you wouldn't. I bet you wouldn't. Yeah, that's what happens to most humans on Earth. Humans don't want to be blamed. Humans don't want to be assigned responsibility for things that they had no idea of happening. That's why most societies don't take responsibility for anything. First, because societies don't take anything. And second, because people in these societies are not willing to take responsibility for anything except for what they personally are in charge of.
Yeah, I have to just to respond a little bit about this. These Palestinian demonstrators, they are not anti-Semitic. They are against Israel's aggression, yes, and war efforts, but there is, I know very well this discussion around the whole university that there is really strict line that they don't allow anti-Semitic. There might be people who are, but I want to just to make justice for them. That's quite important issue also in our Historians Without Border community and event. But your point is right. Reactions comes very easily when people are blamed. Yes, more discussion and questions.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear what you're talking and I think that we, did you pay attention? It's always we Russians, we. Could we somehow because I'm thinking about when, for example, when I'm teaching the history of Second World War in Finland, then I say, okay, the Finnish soldiers did horrible things in the Eastern Karelia. It's the Finnish soldiers, it's not me. I wasn't even born. So could we somehow cut the link between we or me nowadays and the past? It's not like we Russians, we Finns. It's not we. Is it possible?
speaking of me personally, it's what I'm trying to do. I left Russia in 2022, cutting like my ties to this state, to this nation, to this army, to this public, but I still have a Russian passport. And whenever some campaigns are run outside Russia against Putin, they often target Russian emigres like myself or Ilya or Katerina, just because, based on our nationality, on our passports, we're subsumed the Russians. Yeah? Like, so I find myself as a part of this larger we just because I'm holding a Russian passport. Yeah? So yes, we should always answer for ourselves and think and decide for ourselves personally, and for those who are like dependent on us, like our children, for example, or our old parents sometimes. But over and over again, we face like measures, attitudes, opinions, accusations, or expressions of admiration and gratitude also, which push us into this collective image of the Russians.
From my point of view, it's a really great exercise. You know what? That's what happened actually in Germany, because you have like third generation of German Turks, and when the teacher is saying like we Germans did this, this, and this, I mean, like Germanized Turks saying like, no, I do not belong to this kind of ideas. That was Germans, yes. But let's say not we, but they did this kind of things, yeah, and this, I think it's a really great exercise in order to draw the line between the past and the present, and it's really healthy, because when you always referring to past, you kind of stuck there. We did something, yeah, and it's a really great exercise to put the line between the past and the present, and to understand that you are right here, right now, and you know what happened. You do not deny these kind of things, but you draw the line. And thank you very much for this kind of a suggestion.
Okay, and Heta has next.
Thank you very much. This has been a very interesting panel discussion and excellent points. I just wanted to point out that just as we here are, using our awareness and understanding of history, so are, for example, the students out there who are protesting and, kind of applying the things that they learn here at the university. I assume many of them are also students of humanities, are also doing the same as we are kind of doing in this element here, more or less. So I think it's important to support the students as well. But I would like to hear your thoughts on what do you think that the international historical community, what can we do in this moment? I'm not only talking about Russians in exile, historians, but also, in Finland or in other countries. What is our role?
Good question. Kati, you are now representing the collective.
Well, that was a big question. I think that we have to continue doing what we do at the moment, that we try to, personally as historians, we try to keep unlearning, becoming conscious of our own images, and also kind of trying to contribute to that process in other people as well. In a way, trying to make sense of history, not in the sense that we are going to support any national narratives, but try to bring forth the multivocality in history in the ways that we do as individual historians. We all do different things, so it's very difficult to say that what we as a community of historians should do, but I think that we have to just keep trying. Yeah.
So do you others have comments to the community of historians? What we can do It's not only the privilege of Finnish historians.
I noticed a trend that when you apply for grants, for big grants, let's say for like GFG or I don't know any others, so they kind of stop tolerating research focused on Soviet history or on Russia or something else, which is basically not connected to, for instance, queer studies or any kind of very trendy studies right now. So I think it will be, it's great to raise these kind of questions because we cannot change the narrative if we do not have any opportunity to change it. We cannot all be specialists in queer history. It's ridiculous. I mean, and I'm still think that if people are it's kind of 50% of the work to applying to grants, and if they know that they cannot get this money to continue their history, to continue their project, I'm sorry, they will not go in to do this kind of things. They will go to the different area because all of them, well, most of them, they have to eat and they have to survive and they have to buy their kids some, I don't know, clothes. Yeah. So that is why I think I've noticed this kind of trend. I don't know if this is a trend here in the Finnish academia, but it really bothers me a lot because I think we have to support this kind of research because without this, we're not going to change this narrative, actually. But and I mean, and it's our future task to do this kind of things, to prepare the basement, for the future research and for the future cooperation. Because if suddenly we will get another authorities in Russian Federation, we will stand like this with empty hands. What are we going to suggest them? How we can help them to rebuild the historical narrative? How we can help them to rebuild the society? I think it's well, it is important.
Ilya, please.
Probably my vision is very oversimplified. We have to maintain, to keep up and running those existing networks, and we have to try to build new networks. And secondly, we have to think about next generation of researchers, of instructors. Must keep them in mind all the time.
Kirill, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I totally agree with all the things that were said before. So, yes, maintaining networks, inviting Russian scholars to conferences such as this one, or to research conferences on specific topics in which they are specialists, for them to be, to maintain their work, for them to have a goal, like next year I'm invited to Helsinki and I have to give a talk there, I need to do some research. Funding is essential, of course, but also what is essential is the sense of being being a member of a research network, continuing to exist as a scholar and not just a person who is striving for survival. This is very important.
Thank you. I don't see any more comments or questions. Okay, there are two, and these two, please keep them short, that we have to finish this after 10 minutes, so that we have a chance to give a word for our panelists as well.
I'm sorry, but I'm very struck with what you said about collective responsibility, because if you're blaming someone else on the crimes which has been committed in Ukraine, how Russians can learn that apathy actually enables injustice, and in general, like, I don't know, blame. So basically, you are trying to separate the state from the Russian populace, but you're part of that populace. You also have contributed to what is going on in Russia and what Russia has been doing to Ukraine. So how can you really not to feel any responsibility at all? No collective guilt. I'm from Belarus. Belarus is an accomplice in the war, and I do feel the collective guilt. I am responsible for what happened to Bucha, but for some reason, Russians, those Russians who managed to escape their country after the full-scale invasion, for some reason, don't think that they're to be blamed. Sorry for this comment.
That's all right. That's a very important comment. Thank you very much. But I would like to emphasize that we didn't say that we are not responsible for things. You said about the army. The people who did things, they are responsible. I did say that. Yeah, we cannot blame all the Russian society. We cannot blame, I don't know, this babushka from Yaroslavl to be responsible and to be the responsibility for the Russian army in Ukraine, which is, from my point of view, useless. We have to create a system where we can specifically point out to people who are responsible, and then we have to work with the society. And the work with the society is a kind of a different work. I mean, from my point of view, so what guilt exactly means? The guilt is a kind of a block emotion. If you're trying to guilt someone in something, you will immediately get the resistance. So I can reflect on guilt, but I don't think that the general audience can reflect on guilt. And this is really important to understand. We cannot create a sort of public discourse about guilt and to say that we are all responsible for these terrible things that we cannot even digest. But we have to find the narrative how we can talk about this. And this is two different kind of tasks. One of them is a legal one and political one, and another one is a historical one and intellectual one. Yeah, and it's two different things from our point of view.
Thank you. There is a last question.
Okay, my question is about, you talk about information production at some point. My name is Heikki Kastema. I come from international community of Wikipedians called Wikimedias Finland. And I've been following with difficulties with the situation in Russian Wikipedia. There is Russian Wikipedia, Russian language Wikipedia, but it has been split into several, what we call forkings. It has been copied, and there's Russopedia and the other one. Now, Wikipedia and its difficult situation, the Russian language Wikipedia is running, but we hear that Putin has decided to block the media. We don't know. He hasn't done it yet. We don't know why. If he does it, Russian will be the second large language area or country with China, where Wikipedia will be blocked. But my question is about would you consider now Wikipedia isn't about research, and it's not about social media, something between. It doesn't produce research as itself, but it's cited information. Would this kind of information production be fruitful in this kind of situation?
Can someone answer, or you mean that so access to Wikipedia in Russia and production, yeah. So do you have access to Wikipedia, and can you contribute to make text in Wikipedia?
I don't know. I think the Russian, the creator of the Wikipedia is a foreign agent right now, or something like this, as I know, as far as I know. But there is an access to Wikipedia, but we have to be really careful with the information in Wikipedia because people there, they are editing it all the time, and there are very nice kind of fakes, historical fakes you can find there. So, and this is not a reliable source for finding an information about history, for instance, because they constantly trying to edit, they constantly trying to delete kind of sources from there. So, and as soon as it's an open access and an open system, they can do this kind of thing. So that is why I think they still don't want to close the access to it, because they have a kind of a ideological tool to impact.
All right, thank you. I think that our time is full, and the panel has done its work. Let's give a big hand to them. It was good discussion, and thank you for everyone. Thank you for our audience. The seminar is closed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markku.